We know what they're thinking while we're making love. They're jealous. They'll be users of kisses and everything more than I can explain. When I'm walking, talking with my sweetness down among the sugar cane.
Corporations are legally required to maximize shareholder profits, and therefore have to oppose public health policies that could threaten profits. It's just how the system is set up. Unequivocal, long-standing evidence shows that to achieve this, diverse industries with products that can damage health have worked systematically to subvert the scientific process. Take the sugar industry, for example. Internal documents show that they were concerned that health food faddists were becoming an active menace to the industry. Sugar was under attack, and many of the poor, unfortunate public swallow the misinformation broadcast by the propagandists. What were books like Yudkin's Pure, White, and Deadly saying? All of the propaganda is to the effect that sugar is a non-essential food. No! How dare they say sugar is a non-essential food? Next they'll be saying it's not really food at all. And that was the sugar industry's line. Sugar is a cheap, safe food. And this coming from the founder and chair of Harvard's nutrition department, Frederick Stare, long known as Harvard's sugar-pushing nutritionist. Not only did the sugar industry try to influence the direction of dental research, but heart disease research as well, paying Stare and colleagues to write this review to help downplay any risk from sugar. Now, to be fair, this was 5 years before we even realized triglycerides were also an independent risk factor beyond just cholesterol. The main reason attention stayed focused on saturated fat is not because of the might of the sugar industry. There was just not as much data to support it. In fact, the even more powerful meat and dairy industries loved the anti-sugar message. Who do you think sponsored Yudkin? Right? In fact, on the first page of Pure, White, and Deadly, he thanks all the food and drug companies that have provided him with constant, generous support. Who paid for Yudkin's speaking tour? The egg industry, of course, to try to take some heat off of cholesterol. Hegstead, one of the co-authors of the funded review, wasn't exactly an industry cheerleader. He recommended people cut down on all the risky stuff, less meat, less saturated fat, less cholesterol, and less sugar, less salt. It wasn't the sugar industry that got him fired for speaking truth to power. It was the beef industry. The sugar industry was able to conceal its funding because the New England Journal of Medicine didn't require disclosure of conflicts of interest until 17 years later. These muckraking researchers suggest policymakers should consider giving less weight to food industry-funded studies. But why is the food industry funding studies at all? Right? When it comes to the corporate manipulation of research, ultimately, conflicts of interest don't just need to be disclosed and managed, but ideally eliminated. Right? Things may not change until public health researchers start refusing to take money from the junk food industry, period. It worked for tobacco. Many prestigious medical and public health institutions have instituted bans on tobacco industry funding. But wait, can't scientists remain objective and impartial even in the face of all that cash? Apparently not, as industry-funded research has been shown to be up to 88 times more likely to produce funder-favorable outcomes. What, do we think corporations are in the business of just handing out money for free? The classic example is the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, who accepted a $1 million grant from Coca-Cola. Before the grant, their official position was that the frequent consumption of sugary beverages can be a significant factor in the initiation and progression of dental cavities, which after the grant changed to scientific evidence is certainly not clear on the exact role the soft drinks play. As CSPI's Integrity in Science project put it, what a difference $1 million makes.
You've heard me say it before, but it bears repeating. Sugar is one of the worst things for your health. Yet it's hiding in almost all of the foods we regularly consume. In fact, the average American eats about 153 pounds pounds of sugar every year, whether they know it or not. For reference, that's about the size of a baby giraffe. That's a lot of sugar. Sadly, our health is paying the price. But the good news is there is something you can do about it. With the information I'm about to share, you can truly have your cake and eat it too. All right, let's talk about the problem with sugar. Let's start with the basics. What is sugar? Well, sugar is we think of it as a carbohydrate. A sugar molecule, glucose, is a sugar molecule. Lactose in milk is a sugar molecule. Fructose is a sugar molecule. But most of us, when we think of sugar, are actually talking about sucrose, table sugar. Sucrose is half glucose and half fructose. Now, many people now dread high fructose corn syrup. In fact, most high fructose corn syrup is about 45% glucose and 55% fructose. But plain old table sugar is 50-50 fructose and glucose. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions about, oh, fructose is good, it doesn't work the same way glucose does. If you've read The Energy Paradox, or for that matter, if you've read any of my books, you know that fructose may be actually more mischievous than glucose in terms of causing fatty liver, in terms of causing elevated cholesterol, and we'll get to that in a minute. But the point is, sugar is sugar is sugar. Now, most people have pretty much made the connection between sugar consumption, drinking sugary drinks, and obesity. But what most people still haven't figured out is the effect sugar has on your gut microbiome. The gut microbiome, part of it, loves sugar, but unfortunately, it's actually the bad bacteria in your gut. And the bad bacteria in your gut, and certainly other fungal species like Candida, thrive on sugar. On the other hand, the other good bacteria in your gut really don't do well with simple sugars. Instead, they like complex sugar molecules, fiber. And that's bunches of sugar molecules all joined together that are very hard for us to break apart, but are very easy for these gut bacteria to ferment. Now, Candida, which I mentioned before, thrives in a sugar environment. And you may remember that I recently did a science experiment to show you how that works. You can actually find it here on my YouTube channel. And we actually fed sugar to yeast, Candida, and you can watch what happens. And it's great must-see television, if I do say so myself. You may remember that Hippocrates and I say all disease in the gut begins in the gut. And you begin to realize just how serious this can be by adding that much sugar into your gut. Now, I've written about this before, and I've actually written an editorial for Thrive.com looking at the effect of World War II rationing. Many of you are aware that during World War II, the United States and many other countries rationed sugar and flour during the war to support our troops. And during the war, with sugar and flour rationing, diabetes plummeted around the world, in the United States, in England, in Denmark, and heart disease plummeted around the world for 5 years during World War II, all because sugar and flour was rationed. And let's not mince words. Anytime you grind up into a fine powder, like wheat, you actually produce sugar molecules that are more quickly absorbed than table sugar. In fact, most of you know that white bread has a glycemic index of 100, whereas sucrose, table sugar, has a lower glycemic index than white bread. And when my patients tell me they don't eat sugar, but they're having bread, I reassure them that there are 4 teaspoons of sugar in each slice of bread. And so when you're having a sandwich, you're inadvertently having 8 teaspoons of sugar, even though it's not appearing on the label. And we'll get to reading labels in just a second. Sugar also takes a huge toll on your immune system. And most of us don't know of a very famous study done by Linus Pauling in the 1950s that shows that any sugar consumption, including drinking a glass of orange juice, suppresses your white blood cell function, their ability to eat bacteria and viruses, by 70% for up to 6 hours after you had that healthy orange juice with its vitamin C, or you had that piece of bread, or you had that pastry, all of which were tried in that experiment. So sugar is, what a whammy. Now, don't even get me started on the effect of heart health. Over and over again, we're told about the dangers of saturated fats and of cholesterol. But in fact, most cholesterol is manufactured in our body. And most cholesterol, most elevated cholesterols in my practice, come from people's sugar consumption. Sugar is converted into the first form of fat, which is triglycerides. Triglycerides, in turn, are carried by cholesterol. So the more sugar you eat, the more triglycerides you make, and the more triglycerides you make, the higher your cholesterol goes. And there are many, many, many studies showing that it's your triglyceride level that has the biggest impact on you and your heart in terms of developing coronary artery disease. And that's why anyone in my office knows I'm a really mean person. And I want their triglycerides to be 40 to 50. And the national standard says that 150 is absolutely normal. And I can tell you that national standard was put there because if you have a triglycerides of 150, I guarantee you that I will have to put you on a statin drug to lower your cholesterol. So it's kind of, a triglyceride level of 150 is normal. I guess I need statin drugs because my cholesterol is so high. And imagine my patient's shock when we lower their triglycerides by removing their fruits and sugars and other sources of sugar from their diet, that their cholesterol plummets just by getting rid of the sugar in their diet. Now, as anyone knows, I'm I guess a recovered sugarholic. Maybe you never recover. But the effect of sugar as an addictive substance is incredibly well known and well studied. We know that studies on rats will choose sugar over both heroin and cocaine if they get the opportunity to press a lever. And they will always go for the sugar hit instead of heroin and cocaine. And think about that for a little while. Okay, so getting off of sugar is pretty doggone hard. One of the reasons it's so hard is because our tongue is 2/3 of the surface is sugar receptors. They're actually sweet receptors, not sugar receptors. So they're looking for sweetness. And fruit season only occurred once a year, usually in the late summer and early fall. And even in the jungle, fruit does not ripen year-round. There are always dry seasons or rainy seasons or cold seasons when fruit isn't produced. So it would be advantageous for us to have sweet receptors on our tongue to make us literally want to eat sweet things that had sugar content. And that sugar content, by the way, was fructose. And we recently had a podcast guest who wears a continuous glucose monitor and has recently been shocked with how healthy fruit spikes his blood sugar. And I see this all the time in my patients. I see it all the time in their blood work and triglycerides. And fruit is just another form of sugar that will spike your blood sugar. I guarantee it. Okay, so we got to get rid of sugar, but sugar is hiding everywhere. So you got to look at labels, and there are lots of sugar disguises. Things like brown rice syrup, glucose, fructose, agave. These are all other words for sugar. Now, there's an even more important trick for decoding food labels. As you remember, the food labels were manipulated to hide the sugar content. And this was done at the behest of big agriculture. So most people, including most of my patients, look at the back of a package and they look at grams of sugar. And quite frankly, they're often quite low on a lot of the products that I tell people are safe. But you have to actually look at, first of all, serving size. Secondly, you have to look at total carbohydrates. Total carbohydrates tells you how much sugar is in that portion. Now, you take away the fiber, which is the next line right below that. And so you take total carbohydrates minus the fiber, and that will actually tell you how many grams of sugar are in that serving size. Now, for fun, there's 4 grams of carbohydrate in a teaspoon of sugar. So take whatever number you arrive at, total carbohydrates minus fiber, and then divide it by 4. And that'll tell you how many teaspoons of sugar is in that product. And when you do that, you will be shocked with where the sugar is coming from. And when I sit down with my patients and we go through their meals and what they're eating, we always find the source of the sugars they're eating. And many of them are apoplectic because it doesn't taste sweet. And they were looking at that sugar on the label, not total carbohydrates. And once we show them that, and once they change and get that out of their diet, not only does their triglycerides plummet, their insulin levels plummet, their pre-diabetes or diabetes goes away, and bonus, their cholesterol numbers plummet. And their good cholesterol goes up. It's win-win-win. All right, I'm going to say it again. I said it in my first book. I say it in every book. Please give fruit the boot. Fruit has been hybridized, genetically modified to have more and more and more sugar content and to be bigger and bigger than ever before. And I've said this ad nauseum. The other problem we have is we now have fruit available 365 days a year. Your genetic engineering could not imagine that a 747 can bring blueberries to Costco in January from Chile. There are no blueberries in January. They are in Chile, but you don't live in Chile. So what in the ding-dong are you eating blueberries in January? And now they're the size of grapes, and they've been bred for sugar content. As I go into in the upcoming book, Unlocking the Keto Code, if you gotta have your berries and you want the benefits of the polyphenols in fruit, then do what I do and do reverse juicing. What's that? You get your juicer. I know you got one. It's sitting in the cupboard someplace. Buy your fruit. Please buy organic. Put it in the juicer. Throw away the juice, and then take the pulp, which has the fiber and the polyphenols, and mix it in your plain coconut yogurt, or mix it in your plain goat yogurt, or mix it in your plain sheep yogurt, or get a silicone ice cube tray, throw it in there, freeze it, pop a couple out, and put it in your smoothie. Reverse juicing. And please, please, please throw the juice away or give it to your worst enemy, because it's pure sugar. Best advice I give any patient: retreat from sweet. If it's sweet, stay away from it. But the important thing is, so many of our foods, the sweetness is hidden. You don't taste the sweet, but the sugar's still there. So read the label. Okay, let's talk about artificial sweeteners. Now, I realize that giving up that sweet taste is incredibly difficult. After all, we're wired to find a sweet taste. And sometimes it's impossible not to be able to satisfy a sweet tooth. So that's where sugar alternatives come in. And a key point of sticking to a diet that you can live with, literally and figuratively, is to getting the right sweeteners that aren't going to do you in. But it's not quite as simple as it sounds. For years, we've had sugar alternatives that have been literally deadly to us. Things like artificial sweeteners like saccharin, aspartame, sucralose, which are particularly poison. In fact, some of you know them as Sweet and Low, Equal, and Splenda. We know from a Duke University study in 2007, 1 packet of Splenda, sucralose, will kill off 50% of your microbiome. 1 packet, that's all it took. Part of the problem is it usually kills off your good microbiome. The other problem with non-nutritive sweeteners is your brain does not know the sweet signal from a fake sugar versus real sugar. Your brain, when you taste something sweet, assumes you're eating sugar. It doesn't know any better. And so when sugar doesn't arrive in your brain literally says, wait a minute, you've been cheated, sugar didn't come, go back and get some more. And that's why, as you know, I was a Diet Coke addict. I drank 8 Diet Cokes a day because I was always being told by my brain to go find more food, and I was 70 pounds overweight, thanks to the artificial sweeteners. Okay, but what about natural sugars? Those must be better for me, right? No, unfortunately, natural sugars are the same. Whether it's orange juice, coconut sugar, organic sugar, sugar is sugar. Now, if you gotta have honey, try to have less or about a teaspoon a day. That's not much. And make it local or Manuka honey. That'll be okay. Are there sweet alternatives that aren't going to kill you? Well, let's get to the good stuff. There are actually several quite safe sweeteners, and there's a really good one now that's gone to the top of my list. Two of the safest are allulose and monk fruit. Now, both of them offer you that sweet taste without spiking your blood sugar. And they do so while also feeding your gut buddies with prebiotics. In fact, allulose has now been granted a prebiotic fiber designation by the FDA. For those of you who don't know allulose, I've touted it in The Energy Paradox, and it figures prominently in Unlocking the Keto Code, my next book. Allulose is a rare sugar. It was first discovered in figs, but it's a very rare sugar. So it is a, quote, natural sugar. But it has no caloric value, but it's really sweet. The nice thing about allulose is it has fiber. And I've found, and I think Kate has found as well, that allulose works really well in baking recipes and also in ice cream recipes. It's really now my go-to sweetener. But please, look for non-GMO allulose. There's a lot of allulose being produced. Most allulose is produced from corn. It does not have any corn lectins or corn proteins, folks. But look for non-GMO. It's available, and I think you're going to like it. Now, when it comes to monk fruit, the Lakanto brand is really good, and I like that a lot. There are several now chocolates that are sweetened with monk fruit. There are a couple chocolate bars coming out with allulose. They're a little expensive right now, but stay tuned. Another great option is inulin. Now, inulin is the sugar in chicory that's also probably the best prebiotic there is. Just like sugar is a great product, but wherever you see inulin, that's also a good alternative. And you can buy inulin in bulk. It does have a sweet flavor. It's not an overwhelming sweet flavor, so you got to use a lot of inulin if you're using it purely as a sweetener. But it gives you a great prebiotic fiber at the same time.